Here I'll present a clear-cut case to demonstrate why destroying the environment is good, while refuting any counterclaims to my position. We start off with the definition of environment. The useful definition is the untamed, untouched surroundings with which no human influence or activity has come into contact. So the environment specifically excludes man or is non-man. To destroy the environment is to transform it. And how do we transform it? Humans use scarce means, such as their labor, to differentiate it. Now I justify why this is good and should be the case. It is good because the environment provides us with scarce resources. Because there are scarce resources, we must allocate these resources, or capital goods, for productive processes. For example, a farmer harvesting wheat necessarily employs destroying the environment because he has transformed it to either benefit himself or benefit man in general by increasing the general standards of living. To deny destroying the environment is thus to deny economizing resources and increasing man's position relative to where they were before. This establishes nothing more than a primitive lifestyle. Now I'm going to address the most common counter-argument made by environmentalists and why they are wrong. The counter-argument here is that the environment must be preserved and not destroyed because resources are limited and therefore we must ensure there's room for consumption by future generations. Otherwise, resources would all run out and humanity would face death. So I ask the environmentalist one question: who determines how much of a thing is too much to consume? In other words, who determines that, say, I can chop down one tree, but I should not chop down the others? This comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of economics. Economics is the study of how resources can be allocated with minimal input for maximum output or satisfaction. Economics is not just about the management of resources, it is about what are the best ways to do so. Best being defined as getting the most out of something in value with minimal labor. Goods and services in the economy have prices attached to them, but what do these prices mean? Prices in an economy signal how much the consumer is willing to pay for a good or service. Lower prices suggest lower value, whereas higher prices mean higher value. If a good or service is more valued, this incentivizes business owners to invest in it because it's more profitable. So value guides prices. Therefore, it would be completely arbitrary or baseless for the environmentalist to say that I should only cut half a tree and leave the rest, because the environmentalist cannot determine which economic process is more value productive. If cutting more trees provides me with more value, then I'm willing to increase my labor. If I didn't have any use or value in cutting down trees, I would not use my time and labor for such an undertaking. In the same way, decreasing the supply of wood for the purpose of saving it for the future generation is also arbitrary, because there are no price signals attached to the future generation. Therefore, entrepreneurs cannot determine whether or not it's more value productive to restrict consumption for future investment. Therefore, if I cut down 500 trees, this means I was willing to invest so much time and effort because I knew doing so would provide me with value. To say that the future generation or other people need these 500 trees more than I do would require them to demonstrate that by giving up their labor to perform such a task. Otherwise, they were not willing to do it. And let's suppose that the earth already ran out of certain resources and became scarcer. This is not necessarily a bad thing. The argument that natural resources becoming ever more limited is not a bad thing, but it is in fact a good thing because it demonstrates that man has put these capital goods into productive processes, which the market or society demanded. So every time we hear in the news that human activity and production is ramping up, leading to the resources being used up, this should signify man's intellect and his ability to allocate capital efficiently under the guidelines of price signals, because prices determine value, which then guides where resources should go. Now we enter into a world where steel, once scarce, is very limited and actually runs out. This does not decrease man's values or general standards of living. Let me explain. In philosophy, we study existence, which is called ontology, and we also study knowledge or epistemology. For starters, epistemology and ontology are interconnected, which just means in plain language that knowledge and existence aren't separable, because knowledge is defined as the ability to perceive reality. To say that knowledge is disconnected from reality is an anti-concept fallacy. How do humans gain knowledge? From real-world experiences. If this claim is true, then it must also follow that humans can only value things that exist and can be consumed. For example, you can never understand how chocolate cake tastes without trying it. To claim that you already know how it tastes or is valued is to commit a priori knowledge, or knowledge before experience. In philosophy, a priori knowledge is knowledge acquired independently of particular sensory experience. But as we know, knowledge does not come from internal processes alone. Our cognition explicitly relies on sensory data to understand and perceive things, thereby humans being able to organize their own respective values. In this world of scarcity, where steel does not exist, this will not reduce man's values, because man couldn't form the concept of steel and how it benefits man, therefore man's values couldn't have been damaged. To say that man's values have been damaged is to say that they experienced a decline in standards of living relative to a point where they were better off. But since the future generation didn't ever experience the value of steel, they couldn't have known it. If they couldn't have known it, then they couldn't have experienced a decrease in standards of living, because that would imply that they knew how steel benefited them before experiencing a fall in that experience. Therefore, it could be said that a poor person who has never experienced a villa before and has been living in a small house but provides sufficient value to him is actually better off than a rich person who lives in a penthouse but has unsatisfied value scales because he wants to experience something higher than he already does. The conclusion to this is that in a post-scarce world, people would adapt to different things and use different resources at their disposal and allocate them in the best possible way. If the environmentalist would still like to make the claim that this is a bad thing, then I ask the environmentalist why he or she doesn't say that man is impoverished because we don't live in heaven. Well, we don't have experience of heaven, so we don't have value perception of it. Therefore, we couldn't have been impoverished in value or standards of living. So environmentalists are actually mysticists and implying an impossible philosophy that man can value without concept of something. This should be completely avoided in the field of economics. The conclusion of this video should be to inform you that nature is inherently evil, and through overcoming nature, we can transform Earth into the most civilized human society ever at the expense of animals and untouched resources. If it were not for the settlers that established Jamestown in 1607, or the Mayflower Pilgrims that set up the colony of Plymouth, the US would have never come into existence and be the nation it was today. Even the phone that you're using to watch this video necessarily implies you valued your phone more than you did the environment, because you prefer to buy a phone over damaging the environment, and that's the trade-off you implicitly made. Thanks for watching this video, and make sure to give it a thumbs up, and see you later.
The money comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. We'll give it a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men, they'll be my property.